They electrocuted me in my own yard, snatched my 10-year-old daughter, shoved her into a black SUV. No badge, no warrant, just a lie called HOA compliance. They thought I'd panic. They thought I'd beg. Instead, I weaponized every second. I tracked them, hunted them, burned their fake camp to ash. And at the center of it all, Karen, the queen of control. She funded it. She signed it. Now she's the one screaming behind bars. They gave me 47 minutes. I used 46 to dismantle her entire empire. Stay with me. This story isn't just mine. It could be yours. I should have known the silence meant something was wrong. The pines stood still that morning. Too still. Not a single bird, not a rustle. Just the low hiss of wind through the canyon, brushing past the cabin like it didn't want to be noticed. Sophie, my daughter, didn't notice either. She was 10. Too young to recognize the difference between quiet and danger. I stood on the porch of our old timber cabin, watching her ride in slow, looping circles. Her tires crunched softly on the gravel drive. She wore her yellow t-shirt, the one that said, "Nature is my superpower," and a pink helmet with purple stars. She was humming, happy, and I let myself relax. Just for a second. That was my mistake. The SUV rolled into view like it had no right to exist. Military green, windows blacked out, no plates. It crept along the trail, tires barely making a sound over the pine needles. I straightened instinctively. My left hand found the grip of the old axe stuck in the woodpile. My gut tightened. Then I saw them. 2 men stepped out. They wore tactical vests marked with white block letters. HOA Compliance Rangers. I almost laughed until I saw the belts, radios, zip ties. One of them carried a clipboard. The other wore gloves, black, latex, tight. This wasn't a routine inspection. "Can I help you?" I called out, voice sharp. The clipboard guy answered like he was reciting from a script. "We've received a report of unregistered recreational activity within a protected ecological zone." My jaw flexed. "You mean my daughter riding her bike? In our driveway?" "We'll need to verify her environmental permit," he said. I took a step off the porch. "There's no such thing." They ignored me. The gloved man started walking, past me, past the mailbox, straight toward Sophie. "Stop!" I barked. He didn't. Sophie slowed, confused. Her face turned toward me, eyes wide. Then the gloved man lunged. He grabbed her by the arm, yanked her off the bike like she was a rag doll. She hit the gravel hard, cried out, palms scraped raw. "Hey!" I roared. I was already moving. Off the porch, down the steps, sprinting across the yard. The clipboard guy pulled something from his vest. A taser. Raised it. "Back off, sir. This is a designated compliance operation under HOA Directive 4B. "There is no goddamn Directive 4B! I kept going. The taser fired. The jolt tore through my chest, locked my spine, and dropped me like a felled tree. Pain lanced through every nerve as I collapsed, choking, fists clenched in useless fury. Sophie was screaming. The SUV door opened. They shoved her inside. "Get your hands off her!" I bellowed through gritted teeth. My vision blurred. The world tilted sideways. Then they were gone. Tires spinning, headlights flashing between the trees as they disappeared into the woods. And I lay there, paralyzed on the ground I had cleared by hand just months before, gasping like a man drowning in dirt. Karen. Even if she wasn't here, I could smell her fingerprints all over this. She ran this HOA like a warlord in yoga pants. Her bylaws were weapons. Her fines were grenades. I'd fought insurgents with more transparency than that woman. But this was beyond anything I'd imagined. They took my daughter. I don't care what badge they faked. I don't care what fake ordinance they quoted. They took my daughter. And for that, I will take everything from them. I came to with dirt in my mouth and the taste of metal on my tongue. My arms twitched as sensation bled back into my limbs. The taser had short-circuited my entire nervous system. My heartbeat was still erratic, pounding in my ears like war drums. I rolled onto my side, coughing hard, vision swimming. The porch light flickered above me like a warning flare. Sophie was gone. I staggered to my feet. My chest felt like it had been trampled by a bull. But I didn't care. I sprinted inside the cabin, kicked the door open so hard it bounced off the wall, and dove for the satellite phone. No signal. Of course. We were deep in Sierra Pines. That's why I chose this place. No towers, no distractions, no threats. That had been the point. Now it was a trap. I grabbed the emergency laptop from the gun safe, punched the key code, fired up the encrypted line. Rafe answered on the third ring. "Monroe, talk to me." "They took Sophie," I growled. "Fake HOA Rangers, tactical vests, black SUV, no plates." There was a beat of silence. "Jesus," he muttered. "Do you have a timestamp?" "They hit at 4:13. Said she violated some environmental ordinance. They used a taser. She's 10, Rafe. 10. I'm pulling traffic feeds now. Sending drones. Hang tight." "No." I clenched my jaw. "We don't have time to hang anything. I need eyes now." A second later, the screen flooded with aerial imagery. Infrared, road maps, park schematics. Rafe's voice came through like a steel blade. "They're heading north. Stop near the old Ranger substation. Coordinates marked. They're offloading something into the camp building." Camp. Building. I knew what that meant. "How long before they move again?" I asked. A pause. "Intercepted a transmission," he said. "Something about transfer scheduled at 0500. That gives you—" I looked at my watch. 47 minutes. That was all I needed. I packed 2 blades, a suppressor, gloves, and a vial of flashburn gel. I strapped on my vest, tucked the portable jammer into my belt, and shut the laptop. Before heading out, I turned to the photo of Sophie on the mantel, her missing front tooth, her silly braid, her eyes full of trust. "I'm coming," I whispered. "And God help the bastards in my way." Then I paused. Karen. She wasn't a ranger. She wasn't even in this forest. But I could feel her fingerprints all over this. She always had a new rule, a new fine, a new way to twist authority into a noose. She had said, just weeks ago at the HOA town hall, "Children should learn early that there are consequences to disrespecting the community." I remember thinking, no one says that unless they're planning something. Well, she planned this. Now I would plan her end. I climbed onto the ATV, engine rumbling like thunder, headlights off, night vision locked. The clock was ticking, and I would not be late. If you're still watching at this point, if your heart sank when they took Sophie, and you felt that cold rage build like I did, type 7 in the comments. So I know I wasn't the only one ready to fight back. I parked the ATV behind a thicket of redwoods and killed the engine. Darkness pressed in like a weight. Every sound mattered now. The shift of branches, the crunch of pine under boots that weren't mine. My pulse was steady, but every second screamed with urgency. I scanned the ridge ahead. There it was. The old Ranger substation, now bastardized with floodlights and plastic fencing. A mock facility draped in authority. One flag, no insignia, just bold black letters on white tarp. Civic Shield, HOA Recreational Compliance Camp. The bile rose in my throat. Karen's fingerprints were everywhere. Corporate fonts, weaponized branding, and her favorite word, compliance. She'd always thrown that around like a whip at every HOA meeting. "Compliance builds character," she once said. No, Karen. Compliance builds cowards. You build cages. I ducked behind a stump, pulled out my thermal scope. 4 bodies, 2 armed, 1 pacing, 1 seated, small, knees drawn. Sophie, still alive. I tapped my comm. "Rafe, I've got visual. 4 tangos. 1 target, northeast window, sitting on a mattress. Hands zip-tied." "Copy that," Rafe said. "Electrical grids on a single junction. I can short it remotely." "Do it when I say, not before." I checked my gear again. Dual blades, subsonic sidearm, hand-tied cord, quiet tools. I wasn't here to negotiate. This wasn't a rescue. This was a reclamation. I gritted my teeth, eyes fixed on that shack of a building. Sophie was in there. Karen might not be, but her sickness was. Her arrogance, her belief that power gave her permission. She thought she could control this community. She tried to control my daughter. Now I'll control how her empire ends. I took a breath, rolled my shoulders, and whispered into the mic. 10 minutes. On my mark. Cut the lights. Then we gut the nest. And I moved. I moved like a shadow between the trees, boots silent on damp needles. The makeshift camp loomed ahead, half lit, half sinister, an ugly hybrid of a scout cabin and a militia checkpoint. Karen's idea of justice. Manufactured authority. Artificial fear. She always talked about streamlining enforcement. Now I saw what that meant. Prefab plywood prisons and armed idiots in tactical cosplay. I spotted the generator shack near the utility pole. Chain link wrapped around it, padlocked. Weak design. Karen always underestimated the cost of real security. She preferred appearances over substance. She thought rules could replace resistance. I knelt behind a boulder and tapped my comm. Rafe, lock and load. You ready? Grids mapped. Say the word. 3, 2, mark. There was a short static pop, then darkness. The floodlights died like snuffed torches. The compound plunged into a void of confusion. Someone shouted. Another cursed. Flashlights clicked on, swinging wildly in panic. I sprinted low, tight to the fence line, climbed the rear scaffolding. My fingers gripped the ledge like claws. A guard stepped out of the side door, muttering into a dead radio. I launched, elbow to throat, knife to ribs. He dropped without a sound. His flashlight rolled across the dirt, casting a pale glow on his shocked eyes. One down. I slid through the side entrance, weapons drawn. Inside, the hall reeked of mildew and control. Posters on the wall read, "Behavior is a choice. Non-compliance is a breach." Karen Denton, Director of Civic Standards. Her face. Her name. Plastered like propaganda in a regime. I gritted my teeth. She didn't need to be here physically. Her sickness infected everything. She built this, not for safety, not for order, but to break people. I crept past an empty bunk room, turned left, a creaking door ahead. I could hear it now, soft sobbing. Choked breaths. Sophie. I kicked the door in with every ounce of fury I had. The flashlight inside turned fast, too slow. One round. Center mass. The man dropped like a sack of meat, radio still clutched in his hand. Sophie turned to me, wrists zip-tied, face tear-streaked, but eyes wide with recognition. Dad. I was already there, cutting her free, arms wrapping around her as she trembled in my grip. I got you, I whispered. I got you. She clung to me like life itself, but I wasn't finished, not even close. Sophie was still shaking when I carried her out of that room. Her wrists were raw, her knees scraped. She clung to my vest like it was the only solid thing in the world. And maybe it was, but I couldn't stop moving, not yet. Can you walk? I asked, crouching beside her. She nodded, barely. I helped her stand. We crept down the corridor, bare concrete, flickering exit signs, and Karen's voice echoing from every poster. Obedience is order. Parents fail. Protocol does not. I nearly tore the signs down with my bare hands. She made this place? Sophie whispered. Not with her hands, I muttered, but with her poison. We passed a room where another child sat alone on a mattress, eyes glassy. I wanted to kick the door in, take them all. But I had minutes left. Karen's clock was still ticking, even in her absence. I found the command room by scent, sweat, coffee, electronics. A cheap security center buzzing with backup power. 3 monitors still active. One was marked Transfer Roster. Sophie's name was second on the list. Beneath it, a note. Compliant after 24 hours. Break window is 05 o'clock. Break. Window. They weren't trying to help her. They were trying to erase her will. I downloaded everything. Rosters, ledgers, maps, onto a portable drive. But I wasn't done. Not until I left a scar. I reached for the flare grenade Rafe had packed in my belt. What are you doing? Sophie asked. I looked at her. Karen built this place to break people. I'm tearing it out at the root. I pulled the pin. tossed it through the window into the records room. Flames kissed paper. Sirens wailed. We ran. I didn't look back. Not because I didn't want to. Because I wanted the fire to remember her name. The sirens exploded behind us like banshees. Red strobes lit the forest through broken windows as smoke rolled up into the treetops. The fire spread fast, faster than I'd hoped. Karen had built her house of cards with cheap wiring and paper-thin walls. Poetic. "Stay low," I told Sophie, gripping her hand. "No noise, no hesitation." We moved through the trees like hunted animals. My ears caught voices behind us. Men yelling, boots crashing through underbrush, the chaos of control slipping through fingers. I smiled. Let them scramble. "Who's chasing us?" Sophie asked between gasps. "Karen's toys," I growled. "Plastic soldiers with real egos." A shout echoed to our left. Flashlight beams cut through the dark. I shoved Sophie behind a fallen log, drew my sidearm, waited. 2 men moved into view, both with civic shield vests and the same smug posture Karen loved. Chin high, like the woods belonged to them. They didn't see the barrel until I stepped from the shadow. 2 shots. Clean. Final. Their bodies dropped in a silent heap. Sophie stared. "They tried to erase you," I said. "I just erased them first." She didn't flinch. We kept moving. 10 minutes later, the ridge came into view. Rafe's signal light blinking from the ATV like a promise. I lifted Sophie, ran the last stretch through a clearing that once held wildflowers. Now it held ash. Karen's ash. As I strapped Sophie into the back seat, I looked back at the flames. She built that place to train submission. She forgot one thing. Some of us were trained to fight back. I climbed on, started the engine, and drove toward vengeance. Back at the secondary cabin, I slammed the door behind us and locked every bolt. Sophie curled up under a blanket on the couch, silent but safe. That was enough for now. Rafe sat at the folding table, eyes glued to the laptop. I dropped the data drive into his palm like it was a live grenade. "Burn through it," I ordered. "I want everything." He didn't ask questions. He knew the look in my eyes. We weren't searching for evidence. We were hunting blood. Within minutes, names filled the screen. Rosters, transfers, payments. A whole digital empire hiding behind HOA letterhead. Civic Shield was just a front, a fake shell masking a child reconditioning network. Then Rafe froze. "Here," he said. "You're gonna want to see this." He pulled up a scanned authorization form. Letterhead, Sierra Pines, HOA. Signature at the bottom in bold, curling ink. Karen Denton. My chest tightened. Authorization to fund Civic Shield pilot program for non-compliant youth behavior intervention. Rafe read aloud. Signed 3 months ago. "She knew," I growled. "She didn't just approve it, she designed it." Karen always preached about community integrity, about correcting behavior before it spreads. She didn't want order, she wanted ownership. "She turned an HOA into a goddamn abduction ring," I said. "And she smiled doing it." Rafe looked at me. "What do we do?" I stared at the signature. I could see her face behind the ink, smug, cold, untouchable. "Simple," I said. "We rip the mask off. We drag her name through every court, every headline, every room she ever tried to control." I leaned forward. "And when I speak, she'll be there to watch it burn." I didn't knock. I walked straight through the front doors of the Sierra Pines HOA clubhouse, shoulders square, boots echoing off the tile. The crowd went quiet the second they saw me. I wore my full dress uniform, not because I needed the recognition, but because Karen respected uniforms. Or rather, she feared them. She had spent years wrapping herself in fake authority, weaponizing clipboards and bylaws. Now she'd come face to face with someone who had worn power for real, and earned it. She stood at the podium like a porcelain doll dipped in condescension. Red blazer, pearls. Her platinum hair curled perfectly above hollow eyes. When she saw me, her smile faltered. "Mr. Monroe," she said, voice syrupy. "This is a scheduled meeting. You're not on the agenda." I didn't blink. I walked straight up the center aisle, past neighbors who once waved politely, now staring in stunned silence. "I'm not here for your agenda," I said. "I'm here to end it." Gasps. Phones raised. Whispers spread like wildfire. Karen lifted her chin. "Security." "Sit down," I barked. She flinched. I reached into my coat and pulled out the portable speaker, set it on the podium, hit play. Her voice came first, clipped, smug, unmistakable. "Parents who won't enforce order must be taught a lesson. Children are malleable. HOA compliance can start at any age." The room exploded. Someone shouted, "She said that?" Another, "My son was fined for drawing with chalk." Karen's face turned pale. "This is taken out of context." "No," I snapped. "This is the context. You signed off on Civic Shield. You funneled HOA funds into a facility that kidnapped children. You approved methods designed to break them. I've got the documents. I've got the names. I've got your signature on every dollar." Rafe stepped out from the side door, holding a stack of printed files. He handed them to two men in suits, federal investigators. Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came. I turned back to the room. "You trusted her with your fees, your bylaws, your families. She used it all to build her own kingdom, not to protect you, but to control you, to punish anyone who didn't bow." I paused. "My daughter was taken," I said, voice low. "Dragged from my driveway, thrown into a concrete cell, because I didn't color inside her lines, because I dared to say no." Murmurs turned to fury. People stood. A woman wept. A man clenched his fists. Karen tried to speak again, but the agents moved. "Karen Denton," one said, flashing a badge. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, abuse of authority, false imprisonment, and multiple counts of child endangerment." Gasps turned into cheers. As they cuffed her, she twisted toward me. "You ruined everything," she hissed. "No," I said. "You did that the moment you thought rules made you invincible." She was dragged out beneath a storm of boos. Her clipboard fell to the floor with a hollow clack. Fitting. The president of the HOA. The queen of code violations. Gone. I turned to the crowd one last time. "This doesn't end with her," I said. "We rebuild this neighborhood. We rip out every root she left behind. And we never, never let someone like her rise again." Silence. Then applause. Real applause. Not polite. Not scripted. For the first time in a long time, the room didn't belong to her anymore. It belonged to the people. And that was the first real rule worth following. The cabin was quiet again. Not the fake kind. The kind I'd felt the morning they took Sophie. This was real silence. Earned silence. The kind that comes after you've fought through hell and made it back. Sophie sat on the front steps, clutching a new sketch pad someone from the neighborhood had dropped off. She wasn't drawing yet, just holding it, like it was proof she could finally choose what to do again. I stood behind her, arms crossed, watching the trees sway gently in the late afternoon sun. No sirens, no shadows, just wind, leaves, and the distant sound of birds returning, like they too had waited for the war to end. Rafe pulled up the drive, dust trailing behind his truck. He stepped out, holding a worn envelope. "From the courthouse," he said. "Final paperwork. HOA charter officially dissolved this morning." I took it. Didn't open it. Didn't need to. "Karen?" I asked. "Denied bail," he said. "Judge called her a systemic manipulator of suburban fear. Prosecutors are pushing for the max." I nodded. "Let them." He paused, then added, "People are calling you a hero." I looked at Sophie. "No," I said. "I'm a father." He smiled. "One hell of a dangerous one." He left us there in the breeze. I sat down next to Sophie, watching her trace the cover of the pad with her thumb. "Want to talk?" I asked gently. She shook her head. Not yet. That's okay. She leaned her head against my arm. I knew you'd come. I swallowed hard. You were never alone. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. She'd survived more than most adults ever would, and she still had her heart intact. That's what Karen never understood. She could legislate fences and curfews, issue fines and threats, but you can't legislate loyalty. You can't regulate love. You can't conquer people who refuse to kneel. Sophie finally flipped open the sketch pad. She started to draw. Not rules, not walls, not fear. She drew trees, the cabin, her bike, and in the corner, a small, smiling version of me holding a sign that read, 46 minutes. I smiled. That's how long I had to get her back. That's how long it took to burn their whole empire down. I didn't burn that place just to get my daughter back. I burned it because of what it stood for. Because behind those plywood walls and hollow slogans, behind the fake uniforms and the smug talk of order, was a rot I've seen before. I've seen it in places halfway across the world, in broken cities and crumbling regimes, places where people used rules as weapons, where they wore authority like armor and wielded it against the innocent. I never thought I'd see it here. Not in my neighborhood. Not tucked between HOA newsletters and trimmed hedges. But here it was. And this time, they came for my child. So no, I didn't wait. I didn't file a complaint. I didn't ask politely for help. I acted. I struck. I dismantled. Because the only thing worse than monsters in the dark is the silence that lets them grow. And the silence had gone on long enough. Karen thought she was untouchable. She thought policies and signatures made her bulletproof. She built a system where questioning her meant fines, exile, public shame. But all she really built was a paper throne, and I brought a match. The truth is, I never cared about her rules. I only cared about what they did to people. To neighbors scared to plant sunflowers. To parents afraid to speak up. To kids told that chalk drawings were violations. To little girls like Sophie, dragged away for non-compliance. That wasn't a code violation. That was terrorism in a cardigan. I look at Sophie now, and she's still recovering. Not physically. She's tougher than I'll ever be. But there are questions in her eyes. Quiet ones. Why did they take me? Why didn't someone stop them sooner? Why did the grown-ups let this happen? And I don't have a good answer. All I can say is this. They won't do it again. Because we burned their system to the ground. Because we dragged their queen out in cuffs. Because we showed the neighborhood that fear has limits. And those limits are drawn by people who refuse to be silent. If you're still watching this, maybe you've seen pieces of this story in your own life. Maybe you've watched someone get bullied under the cover of rules. Maybe you've been told to just comply. Maybe you felt that awful chill in your gut when someone with too much power starts using it instead of earning it. And if that's you, let me tell you this, from one fighter to another, you're not alone. You don't need a badge. You don't need a title. You need a line in the sand. You need a spine. And when someone like Karen crosses it, you need to push back hard enough that they never try again. So here's what I want you to do. If you've made it to the end, if your blood boiled when they grabbed Sophie, if you felt something crack open when the lights went out and I went in, drop a 7 in the comments. Let the world see how many of us are awake now. And if this story hit something real, if it reminded you that silence is not safety, then don't just scroll on. Like this video. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell so you're here for the next one. Because next time, it might not be Sophie. It might not be my story. It might be yours. And if it is, I hope someone's watching. I hope someone stands up. And I hope someone lights the match. Until then, stay sharp, stay loud, and stay free. We don't belong to their systems. We never did.